Hi everyone, today we're going to talk about the absolute daddy of media theories, postmodernism. And I'm not going to lie to you, this one is a monster. I've watched hours of YouTube videos about postmodernism and I find they do one of two things. They either make it so unbelievably complicated that we get lost very, very quickly, or they gloss over the details so much that we're not really making the best use of this theory. So today I'm going to throw my hat into the ring and try and explain postmodernism. So here's your challenge. If you can make it all the way to the end of this video, leave yourself a like and perhaps leave me a like too. Okay, so where do we start with postmodernism? I'm going to break down my definition for you nice and slow. Postmodernism refers to the state of culture where media is produced in such staggering quantities that it has crossed the boundaries into reality itself and hyper-reality prevails. And I've lost you, haven't I? It's quite a rabbit hole we've uncovered, so let's break it down nice and simply. What is culture? Culture is the arts, the ideas, the intellectual expression of a society. Traditional culture would include art, poetry, architecture, but in contemporary culture, we're also talking about TV, advertising, music videos, YouTube, social media. So what's the purpose of culture? Well, it's how we interpret and give meaning to the world around us, what we call reality. It helps us answer those big questions in life. What does it mean to be human? How should we live? What is love? Hang on a second. If culture is how we represent reality and find meaning, what the hell are we learning from? Oh crap.
I think I'm ready to start dating again.
What are you looking for?
I do judge children by their name.
You can't say a word.
You're a little You can pay for me to have a new set of extensions.
It's a mess, isn't it? There are so many voices and messages now. How do we know which ones are true? Are any of them even true? Welcome to the hyper-real world of postmodernity. But now you've had a snapshot of where this rabbit hole ends, let's take a quick history lesson to work out how we got here. Baudrillard, a controversial French academic, outlined the development of culture in three distinct stages. In the beginning, there was pre-modern culture. Obviously there was no TV or cinema, but there was art, lots and lots of art, and theatre and music, that kind of thing. What you might call high art. Painters, sculptors, and writers looked at the world around them, reality, and represented it within their understanding of the world at the time, which predominantly means only one thing: religion. So in Western culture, Christianity was the driving force in art, music, and architecture, and they acted as a map of how we should live, what is good, and what is love. Baudrillard calls this a grand narrative, an overarching ideology or meaning applied to reality through culture. So it has to be said for high art, although it was quite primitive, it gave a consistent message, that of the church. Skip forward to the Industrial Revolution, about the 19th, 20th century, and culture's starting to look a little bit different. Rapid advancement in mass image production, either through photography, film, or printing, meant culture was being produced at an extraordinary rate. What's more, unlike paintings, these photos and prints and films actually looked real, unlike their clearly fake cousins on canvas. Baudrillard called these representations of reality simulations, and they add a new layer of believability to their message. What messages are we talking about? Well, obviously religion was still around, but in the wake of the World War, new ideas were starting to emerge, like consumerism.
Mrs. Richardson wears tweed. New tweed parfum de toilette spray.
Communism. Science, meaning that culture started looking less consistently like this and more like this. So when we think back to those big questions from earlier, maybe being human should look like this. Maybe we should live like this.
Also on Saturday mornings, I usually take an hour or so to go over the accounts and bills.
Maybe love looks like this. This explosion of new mass-produced culture, which rejected the old, became known as modernism. Now skip forward to the mid-20th century, where an entire generation has been brought up, surrounded by all of these mass-produced images everywhere you look, and we arrive back here at postmodernism. Baudrillard said that we are so surrounded, bombarded by culture that it's now part of our daily lives, our reality. In other words, all these videos you watch on YouTube, the adverts that precede them, and those that you drive past on your way to work, the magazines you read, every meme, Instagram post, all of them are just as much part of your reality as the trees and the cars that you see outside the window. This is the postmodern world, and it's the effects of all of this media around us that Baudrillard was primarily interested. And I want to outline his three main observations. Firstly, the fact that our reality is in some part made up of cultural representations everywhere means that when we make new cultural products, we inevitably end up referencing other pieces of culture.
Spider-Man first appeared in 1962's classic Amazing Fantasy number 15. Duh!
Which basically means we're making copies of copies, doesn't it? Well, that's exactly what happens according to Baudrillard. Culture is no longer always based on an original referent, reality, but rather cultural products that we experience in the world around us. The word he uses this is simulacra. In other words, no longer a simulation of reality, but a simulation of a simulation. I know it sounds ridiculous, so let's do an experiment. If I was to ask you to draw a picture of a princess, would you draw something like this? Or like this? I'm guessing the former, despite the fact that Disney princesses are themselves a simulation of reality.
Hi.
This is effectively a copy of a copy of a copy. The result of this, taking inspiration from something which is already inspired by reality, is this big mess of incestuous intertext, where our cultural products can't help but be inspired by other texts. Sometimes intertextuality is used intentionally, like in Family Guy, where more often than not, each episode is referencing existing culture for parody. Here's another great example on the front of the big issue, which uses your pre-existing knowledge of Ghostbusters to make a shortcut to meaning, here satirically. In these cases, the links to other text is intentional. But even when it's unintentional, you can still say that we are borrowing from culture when we try to make meaning. Look at how in the new John Lewis Christmas advert, the same narrative of a boy befriending an alien is used as in that of the 1980s film E.T. That's indirect intertextuality. So that's the first part of Baudrillard's work. We're now so surrounded by media that we inevitably reference it when we make new products. The second area I want to talk about is the idea that now, because of all of the media around us, we are unable to distinguish between simulation and reality. The word he uses for this is hyperreality, the blurring of the lines between what is real and what is simulated. Here's an example. If I was to ask you about your knowledge of Chernobyl, how much of what you know is based on fact, things that you know, things that you've researched, and how much is based on what you saw in the TV show?
Some of them will not stop firing for 50,000 years.
Isn't it crazy how quickly we blindly accept simulation as fact? Now think for a second about the wider implications of hyperreality. Young people see the simulated lives of successful young people in reality shows like Made in Chelsea or The Only Way is Essex, and they overlook the fact that they aren't real. In fact, I find the scariest aspect of our new culture is the likes of Instagram and TikTok, which bombard us with simulations of the real, which we blindly accept as true. And then when we think back to our big questions from earlier, what does it mean to be human? Well, if you look at Instagram, it could look like this. Or if you watch TV, it could look like this. How should you live? Well, we could listen to this guy.
What's one thing I'm doing wrong, that I know I'm doing wrong, that I could fix, that I would fix?
Or even these people.
False news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media
What is love? Is it this? Surely it's not this.
This is Sarah. She is the first doll I got. So she does have a special place in my heart, I guess.
Maybe it's this.
I've met the person I want to spend the rest of my life with. I've never seen her before.
Here, you will choose someone to marry.
So that's the second aspect. Hyperreality means we are no longer able to distinguish between the simulated and the real. Which brings us to the third aspect of Baudrillard's work, meaning implosion. With so much media around us, with conflicting messages, there are so many interpretations of reality that audiences can't decide on truth. Remember at the beginning I said there was one grand narrative, religion. Well, now you can find literally any meaning you want online. And you can throw in a couple of other dozen sources which challenge it alongside. How are you meant to trust that? You can't. We don't as an audience. We've become disenfranchised with the idea of the truth. And what's interesting is I think that's actually paved the way for where we are now with fake news. We don't believe it. That's as far as we're going to go today. We've only just scratched the surface of postmodernism. It's a huge, huge topic, but if you're studying Baudrillard specifically, those are the key takeaways. If you've made it this far, then well done. Give yourself a like, and I'd appreciate if you left me one too if you've made it this far, and subscribe if you're new here. But let's just recap on what I started off this video with and see if it makes any more sense now. Postmodernism refers to the state of culture where all media is produced in such staggering quantities that it has crossed the boundaries into reality itself and hyper-reality prevails. Make sense? Good. If you're looking for where to go next, I'd recommend checking out my video on intertextuality, which we've already covered a little bit in this video, but I go into more depth. Or if you're looking at media theory in general, you can check out this playlist here to see the other work that I've done. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.